Welcome to the Daily Insider here on VegasInsider.com. I am Kevin Rogers for Wednesday, October 13th, 2021. We're going to talk NFL Week 6 with Matt Blunt coming up in just a few moments. He joins us for his Wednesday spot here on the Daily Insider to break down his hot and not report and total talk for this week, and some pretty impressive stats that Matt has dug up. You can find them on VegasInsider.com, but Matt's going to explain them coming up in just a few moments. But first, we want to tell you all about BetMGM. They are the king of sports books, and they have a great deal now for new players only. Bet $10 to win $200. If your team scores a touchdown, bet on any NFL money line. And if your team scores a touchdown, you'll receive an additional $200 in free bets. Again, for new players only, must be 21 or over, and is legal in the following states: Arizona, New Jersey, Indiana, Colorado, Tennessee, West Virginia, Iowa, Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C. Only. Full terms and conditions apply. That is BetMGM. They are the king of sports books. So let's talk now about Week 6 in the NFL and some interesting nuggets from our friend Matt Blunt, who joins us. And Matt, this week in your hot and not, a lot of things that you dug up that are pretty interesting. First, teams with a rest disadvantage. This is interesting. Teams with a rest disadvantage in the NFL, they are 11-4 against the spread. So tell us about the rest disadvantage and why these teams have been so successful this season.
As far as why, I couldn't tell you why. Maybe it's something that it's early in the year and guys get comfortable with being their time on the extra time off. I mean, if you ask any team, I bet you they'd say they prefer a bye week later in the year. I mean, the last 4 Super Bowl champions, their bye week have all come week 10 or later. So I still think teams are trying to get into their general routines for the most part. So maybe they get a little lazy with the extra rest or whatnot. I think the extra rest does impact lines in the sense that they get shaded that way because everyone believes rest is such a huge advantage. And I don't think it is this early in the year, and these numbers show it.
Now, the teams that we're going to look at for this situation this week, Matt: Giants, Steelers, Colts, and Ravens. Now, the Giants play the Rams. Steelers play the Seahawks. And obviously, Russell Wilson being out doesn't help Seattle's cause. And then you also have the Colts and the Ravens as well this week. So who do you like out of this group?
Well, the Steelers, I guess the Seahawks is one game I'm not even going to bother touching. I don't think that line is. I think that line's too high on the Steelers, and I would, based on a pure spread play, I would lean Seattle. But this history suggests don't do it, so I'm not even going to bother with that game. The Colts number is a little bit the same. I think they're a good teaser option though. Tease them down through the key numbers of 7 and 3 currently right now, and you can get them or put them on a money line parlay, something like that. The Giants, I'm still waiting on the QB situation. Injuries are the only injuries I really pay attention to are QB injuries. So I think that it's a lot of points for one. But the Rams are a good team that they could just easily smoke the Giants with how many players they lost last week. And the Ravens are a team that I do really like. Again, the Chargers, I mean, I took it on the chin in that with the Chargers win that game against Cleveland last week. But, I mean, there's a lot of iffy calls there. I mean, the PI for the Chargers to tie at 35-35, which the receiver was holding the DB. That is just, I mean, that's typical NFL to me, but whatever. So the Ravens, I think, as long as they can protect the football, Lamar specifically, I think the Ravens are probably the best bet of the bunch.
So the Ravens get the Chargers this week, a very important game in the AFC. Colts get the Texans, and the Colts are nearly 10-point favorites in that game. And we'll see how Houston responds after they blew that game late this past week against New England. Now let's take a look at the who's not hot and non-conference home dogs. 1-10 straight up, 4-7 against the spread. You could have had Detroit against Baltimore as another winner potentially, but of course they lost that game on the last-second Justin Tucker field goal. But any rhyme or reason to why these non-conference home dogs have been so poor?
I would say, I don't know. I mean, I just looked at notice the patterns and results every week, and I see, okay, well, these home dogs are losing, or is there a commonality there? As far as why, I would still guess that they're still, it's kind of like last year where the bad teams are probably a little worse than even anyone thinks they are, and they're not getting enough points this early in the year.
Now, taking a look at these teams to fade this week, Matt. Lions, Washington, and the Patriots. And again, all of these teams with I say 2 of 3 have tough matchups. I don't want to say the Bengals aren't a tough matchup, but Cincinnati is a road favorite. You don't get that often. They go to Detroit. Washington getting 7 against Kansas City. We know the Chiefs' defense has been terrible, but their offense can light it up. And then the Cowboys, 5-0 against the spread, going to New England to face Mac Jones and the Patriots. So anybody you prefer out of this bunch?
Well, I mean, knowing myself for all these years I've been doing this, usually when I take pot shots at people like I did with the Lions coach in the article, that usually comes back to bite me in the ass. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Lions do find a way to get the first win here. But, I mean, the Cowboys and the Patriots game is really intriguing to me because I think it's one of those games that could easily land. Cowboys win, Patriots cover. So how you want to approach that is up to the individual better, but that's how I would suggest that game ends up.
Yeah, these and also Washington too. The other one, Matt, that Washington hung with New Orleans. They made some mistakes last week, and the Saints got that Hail Mary at the end of the half. Heineke got picked off in the end zone, so I wonder how Washington is going to respond coming up this week. Now let's take a look at Total Talk, and you can catch this piece on VegasInsider.com from Matt, as well as the Hot and Not report, which we just talked about. If you want more information on that, go to VegasInsider.com. Now, a couple angles you dug up this week. Over/under +3 turnover margin last week normally means that you won't do well the next week, even though it didn't work out for the Bills this past week at Kansas City. You're going back to that and to try to fade the Bills on their point total?
Yeah, I mean, this turnover margin thing is something I've been keyed on since the beginning of the year, pretty much since week 2, I guess. And like I said last week, I'm a big regression to the mean guy, and just turnovers are something that's I don't think is ever really sustainable over a week-to-week basis over the whole season. Teams are going to be better at forcing turnovers and whatnot. But I mean, last week I got burned by the Bills. But I mean, they had that touchdown late at the half, and they had a pick six, which I don't like. Pick sixes are always just killers for underplays. So I have no problem taking the loss there and coming right back to it with both the Bills team total under this week and the full game under against Tennessee.
Yeah, it's a big number, 30.5 for their team total against the Titans. And I don't really know if you could take a lot from that matchup last year, Matt, but a lot of people, I don't know if they remember, that was the Tuesday night game. Tennessee was wiped out due to COVID. They came back, and then they ended up blowing out Buffalo in that Tuesday night game. So it's a revenge spot for the Bills. They're laying more points here than they did last year. Do you just think on this number, 5.5, 6 on Monday, that this is just totally what we saw last week against Kansas City?
In what regards?
As far as like just this number blowing up with Buffalo now a 5.5, 6-point favorite where they open up at 3.5, that it feels like it's a bit inflated just because of their win over the Chiefs last week.
Oh, I agree. It's inflated for sure. Tennessee, another reason why I'm leaning to the under here is that Tennessee is always going to be a run heavy team to me as long as they have Henry. So in terms of the result with Kansas City, the Bills Kansas City game, doesn't really affect my decision making at all. I mean, the Bills had the revenge there with KC, and I guess technically they had the revenge here with Tennessee, but it's a number I do think is too high. I would take the points with Tennessee, but I mean, the Bills are still a team I think are going to be a bad point spread team overall. It's not really played out so far, and I'm taking it on the chin. So I have questioned my thoughts on that. But I mean, everyone wants to do what they do or everyone wants to base their opinion on what they saw last. And I look at it as what are the topics every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday? It's always, oh, did you have this team putting up this many points, or did you have this team? It's always surprising storylines. Oh, nobody had this team winning, or nobody had this team scoring 10 points against this crappy defense and whatnot. And if that's always the end result on Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday, these talking points, like I look for those absurdities to try and predict them before they happen.
Now, your second angle for this week, Matt. Lowest scoring team. It was the Raiders last week. We know all the issues they've had with John Gruden. He's resigned, and Las Vegas going to try to move forward somehow. They get Denver this week. But you've dug up that teams that are the lowest scoring team from a week actually fare better the next week.
Yeah, again, I mean, this is another regression to the mean type angle where, I mean, the Raiders specifically, there's no way they were interested in playing for their coach after that stuff came out Friday or Saturday, whenever it came out. So, and again, regression, like they're going to positively regress to being better than what these teams score. I mean, a lot of these low scoring teams would have been shut out the last couple of weeks, but there's no team is ever as bad as they seem one week, and no team is ever as good as they seem one week. So I will always believe that, and because these numbers tend to get skewed based on the last week's results, these totals for these low scoring teams always tend to be low. I mean, last week it was the Patriots Houston game that fit this spot, and it was the lowest total of the week, and it was a no doubt over for the most part. I mean, with a lot of missed extra points and whatnot. So it's something I think that regardless of the team, it's a scenario that I do believe will be profitable most years for the whole season.
And that totals 44, and we saw the Broncos finally hit an over last week against the Steelers after they were 4-0 to the under. So wonder if Denver will now continue on that streak, returning home. The final angle you have here, highest scoring team each week and teams involved in games that have scored 70 or teams that combine for 70 points or more. All right, so you're going to look to go under there, and those two teams, as far as team totals, Chargers and Browns had that shootout last week in LA. Chargers ended up winning 47-42. So now it goes back to, say the Raiders, they're going to score, where you think this week these teams are not going to score as much.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's actually two different things. Like the highest scoring team is just the opposite of the lowest scoring team thing. And where you look under, again, like I don't think them putting up, I mean, I think it's been 40 plus points each week for these highest scoring teams. I just don't see that as sustainable on a week to week basis. And then I looked at the absurdity of like 70 plus. I mean, point totals are going up in general in the NFL the last few years. So you see a lot of games in the 50s and 60s. But how about those games that are 70 and higher? Like that's another thing where I don't think is sustainable on a week to week basis. So combining the two actually puts the Chargers and the Browns in that spot where I do think we'll see some unders, even in the sense that the defenses just got shredded. Like both Chargers and the Browns defense got shredded last week. So they're going to be all week saying, look what we did wrong. We got schooled here. We got schooled there. And then sometimes it's just matchups too. Like, I mean, the Browns don't necessarily have the greatest matchup against the Cardinals defensively, and neither the Chargers, to be honest, but that's all stuff's built into the totals to begin with. So I don't mind. The idea being that you hear Monday and Tuesday, oh, the Chargers put up 47 points. And then there's going to be talking, well, how did they only put up 14 this week? And like, it's just absurd storylines that talking points on other shows like this and mainstream media. So if you already know those are going to be what's discussed, then you try and look for the absurdities. And that's all I try and do.
And the total in that Chargers-Ravens game up to 52 at some spots, Cardinals-Browns at 49.5, and Chargers team total 24.5, Browns team total 26.5. So we'll see if they come back down to earth. And also the Ravens coming off that crazy win too over the Colts.
Yeah, and I mean the Chargers-Ravens total going up, I mean it's not surprising. All everyone just saw that fourth quarter in the Chargers game was touchdown after touchdown. And so again, like it's almost predicting the market in a way. And if I always go back, if it's a common assumption that I don't want to put up an exact percent, 90% of the people who bet have trouble winning long term, well, then if you can predict which way the market's going to go based on what you saw last week, why wouldn't you want to go opposite?
And I agree. Look, that 47-42 game, we're not going to see something like that again probably this season. And also Baltimore's defense, everyone, you talk about the Chargers, they want to, clamp down for giving up 42 to the Browns. I'm sure that the Ravens want to clamp down after they've dug themselves that hole against the Colts.
Exactly. I mean, it's the same kind of thing, right? Defenses, I mean, offenses too. Like let's say with the Raiders, I bet you the offensive unit has heard all week, oh, we did this wrong. You got to do this better. We got to stop dropping passes, whatever the mistakes were. So you kind of just expect that these guys are professionals. They'll clean it up to some degree. And then with the idea that the numbers are always going to be skewed to what happened the week before, it's easier to go opposite and just live with the results. I mean, these results show that it's worked so far, so I don't see any reason to change.
Matt Blunt, you could find his work at VegasInsider.com. Hot and Not Report, also Total Talk. They are both up in our NFL arena and also on our homepage. You could find that and get educated. There's a lot of good information there from Matt, and he has different trends every week. So it's not like there's the same thing every week. It's all different things that he's uncovering, and a lot of them are pretty interesting. So, Matt, thank you so much. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, thank you.
All right, there is Matt Blunt, and before we continue and talk about the baseball for, today there's no baseball because the Astros knocked the White Sox out. But want to tell you about WynnBET, though. The WynnBET mobile sports book, when you download it off iOS or Android, guess what? If you're a new patron, you download the mobile sportsbook app, and you're a new patron, you get a $1,000 risk-free bet with a $20 minimum first deposit. And you have a really cool thing here. You get a $1,000 risk-free bet, which basically means if you are in an eligible state, you can get the $1,000 risk-free bet. That means if you lose your first wager, you get it back up to $1,000 as a free bet credit that you can use for another bet. And the promo code for WynnBET's going to expire soon, so make sure you grab it while you can. And also, the WynnBET mobile sportsbook app is eligible, or legal, I should say, in the following states: New Jersey, Colorado, Indiana, Virginia, Arizona, Tennessee, and Michigan. And also WynnBET, the official partner of the New York Jets at MetLife Stadium, the WynnBET Green Room. Next time you're in New Jersey, go to a Jets game, check it out. The Jets are off this week after playing in London last week, but they'll be home again pretty soon. So check that out, the WynnBET Green Room at MetLife Stadium up in New Jersey. WynnBET. Now, I want to tell you about some Major League Baseball as we move on from the NFL. And the Astros end up knocking out the White Sox yesterday. So it's now 5 consecutive ALCSs that the Astros are going to be participating in. And they will draw the Red Sox, which will be a very entertaining series. 2 very good offenses. I mean, Houston's got the best offense in the league. Boston's got so many bats in their lineup. And the Astros a little better starting pitching than the Red Sox. Houston has the home field advantage. They're favored. So we'll see how the Astros fare against the Red Sox in this ALCS. The NLCS is halfway filled up as the Braves beat the Brewers yesterday. So Milwaukee won game 1, and Milwaukee's offense totally dried up in games 2 and 3, getting shut out. They had 2 leads of 2 runs apiece in game 4. And then they had their all-star, all-world closer on the mound, Josh Hader, in the 8th inning. Got a few outs, and then Freddie Freeman came up and hit the first pitch out to center field for the go-ahead run in Atlanta. Now back-to-back years, they're in the NLCS. They were up 3-1 in the Dodgers last year, couldn't hold it. Now let's see what happens if they play the Dodgers or the Giants for the NL pennant. Now, Dodgers and Giants, they play tomorrow in San Francisco, Game 5. LA won last night in a rout. So the Dodgers now extending the series back to the Bay Area for Game 5 tomorrow. Julio Urias and Logan Webb on the mound. And got to assume, I don't know if Dave Roberts would go to Max Scherzer in relief if he needed him to. Obviously, Walker Buehler's unavailable. But the Dodgers, though, they've been shut out twice in this series. Logan Webb has handled the Dodgers this year. Now let's see what the Dodgers can do in this winner-go-home situation. And the positive is that these 2 teams who have the best records in baseball this year are meeting for an elimination game. The only bad news is it's not for the National League pennant. So one of these teams will be left out in the cold. Atlanta's still a pretty good team. They got off to a slow start. Ronald Acuna got hurt. They had a lot of injuries, the Braves, but they were a team in the NLCS last year. So let's not make it out to be like there's someone who's a big surprise. But one of these teams over 100 wins, Dodgers, Giants, they will be out tomorrow night And we'll see if the Braves go to San Francisco for game one, or they will host the Dodgers. That even though LA had a better record than Atlanta in this NLCS, the wild card team will not have, or at least the Dodgers would not have home field advantage coming up in the NLCS. But interestingly enough, the Dodgers would have home field advantage in the World Series. So that's a little bit different. It's a little wacky how they wouldn't have it here, but in the World Series, it's about best record. So you throw the wild card stuff out in that spot. But the Dodgers need to win first before they can worry about all that. So that's what's going on with baseball. NHL last night, in case you missed it, you had 2 overs. Penguins Lightning, it was 2-0 in the third. Crazy third period. Pittsburgh won as an over $2 underdog. I thought that number got out of control. No Crosby, no Malkin, and it didn't matter. Pittsburgh still played really well. Tampa Bay, they raised their banner last night, their championship banner, and they were terrible. They didn't look good. Again, 1 of 82. Pittsburgh played well. They play the Panthers coming up on Thursday. And the Seattle Kraken had their debut last night. They rallied to tie it with the Golden Knights at 3 apiece. Vegas ended up winning 4-3. So if you had Pittsburgh and Seattle on the puck line, you were a big winner. Obviously, Pittsburgh cashed the money line, but Seattle cashed the +1.5, and both games went over the total. So now you have 5 games coming up in the NHL tonight. The Rangers and the Capitals, that game's on TNT. Remember, the NHL is on ESPN. The 2 games were on ESPN last night. They're on ESPN and TNT now. No more NBC Sports Network. So you have Rangers Capitals. Alex Ovechkin, he's questionable. Lower body injury for Washington. Montreal and Toronto. Austin Matthews won't be playing for the Maple Leafs. He's out for a few games. And Montreal knocked Toronto out of the playoffs last year to go all the way to the Stanley Cup before losing to Tampa Bay. Then the 3 late games, Chicago, Colorado. That's the late TNT game out at Pepsi Center. Vancouver and Edmonton. And Winnipeg visits Anaheim. Winnipeg is the only road favorite of the night. So you have 4 home favorites. The only home dog, the Anaheim Ducks, who had the second least amount of points in the NHL last year. They were 5-20 as a home underdog last season. So we'll see how that turns out with the Jets facing the Ducks. Remember, Winnipeg got bounced by Montreal in the second round after they had a golden opportunity to be in that Final Four because Toronto got knocked out and Winnipeg eliminated Edmonton. So if Winnipeg could have knocked out Montreal, they would have been the Final Four, but they got swept by Montreal. So they had a quick exit. So we'll see how they respond tonight in their season opener. Now, college football, you had last night, Louisiana Lafayette. They take care of Appalachian State. Big win for them in the Sun Belt. So Louisiana now 5-1 on the season, and they lost that opener to Texas, and now they've won 5 straight. And Appalachian State, just a bad loss on the road as a favorite. Tomorrow, a few more games, including Navy and Memphis. In the American, Navy has covered 3 straight games. All is a huge dog. They're a dog gang against Memphis. Memphis actually lost 3 straight. And in those 3 games, you could make an argument Memphis could have won all 3. They blew a 21-0 lead to Texas San Antonio, lost on a field goal at the end. They blew a 17-0 lead at Temple, lost outright as a double-digit road favorite. And they went back and forth with Tulsa last week and lost on the road in that one. And Memphis had a ton of yards and just couldn't cash in. So Memphis, double-digit favorite against Navy. We know Navy runs the ball. Navy has cashed last few weeks as a big dog. Now we'll see if Memphis can bounce back after they've had a bit of a rough start. And also on the flip side, Memphis could have won the first 3, but they should have lost to Mississippi State. So it's been a bit of an uneven season for the Tigers through the first few games for them. So that's what's going on. No baseball tonight. Giants, Dodgers tomorrow. You have the hockey tonight. And the NFL tomorrow, Buccaneers and Eagles, they will kick off week 6 in the NFL. And again, to remind you, Tom Brady 0-6 against the spread in prime time since joining the Buccaneers. 0-2 ATS this season. Beat the Cowboys, beat the Patriots in close games. 3-3 straight up, all 3 wins by 3 points or less. So we'll see how that turns out for Tampa Bay. Brady had a minor thumb injury against the Dolphins. Now I mean, he'll be fine to play. He's not going to sit out, but we'll see how that affects him against Philadelphia on Thursday night. And the Eagles off a win over the Panthers last week. So that's today's edition of the Daily Insider. And we'll be back with you tomorrow, and we'll talk NFL and college with Vince Akins. Vince Akins has been tremendous in the NFL. He's the money leader right now through 5 weeks. But we'll talk to Vince. He'll have his trends for tomorrow. So we'll look at that, look ahead to Bucs, Eagles, and some of the big games in the college football landscape for the weekend. So looking forward to that. And again, want to thank Matt Blunt for joining us. That Matt always a great job with uncovering some of these we say trends, but kind of like nuggets and factoids from an ATS and total standpoint. So I want to thank Matt for joining us. And before we exit, again, I want to tell you about BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. Bet $10 to win $200 if your team scores a touchdown. If you bet on any NFL money line and your team scores a touchdown, you'll receive an additional $200 in free bets. This is for new players only, so don't forget that. If you're a new player, you're the only ones that are eligible. Must be 21 or older, eligible in Arizona, New Jersey, Indiana, Colorado, Tennessee, West Virginia, Iowa, Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C. Full terms and conditions apply. That is BetMGM. They are the king of sportsbooks. I am Kevin Rogers. Thanks a lot for tuning into today's edition of the Daily Insider. And if you missed any of it, you can find it on our YouTube channel at Vegas Insider, as well as on the homepage at Vegas Insider until tonight. And again, we appreciate you tuning in. We will talk to you again tomorrow, as we'll talk with Vince Akins, NFL and college football. Tomorrow's a big day. Got a lot of NHL. NFL is back, a couple college games, and the game 5 between the Giants and Dodgers. So a lot going on tomorrow. I am Kevin Rogers. Thanks a lot for watching. And as always, best of luck with your bet.